natural hair movement of the late 2000s had black women the world over ditching their relaxers and opting to sport their natural curls and kinks. I always wanted them. In 2010, after my last relaxer touch-up, I said goodbye to the creamy crack and have been natural ever since. Like many naturals, over the years I have rarely worn my hair straight in fear of damaging my hair. I mean, what I got going on now, this is the first sew-in I have had in a really long time, you know, aside from the time I got a sew-in over the holiday break. But before that, it had been a while. However, over the years, I have peeked over the valley to the intriguing world of straight naturals. Those who opt to wear their hair straight through heat styling. And lately, I have been seeing more and more naturals who want to try something different other than the protective styles like wigs and weaves that they've been doing over the years. The idea of heat training sounded exciting to me, but it also came with a bunch of questions. How would this affect my 4C hair? What's the deal with heat protectants? Do they actually work? Which products should I be using? Which tools should I use? Could heat training eventually lead to hair loss? So to answer these questions and more, I spoke to a black hairstylist who specializes in heat training, a black dermatologist who specializes in hair loss, and a black scientist who creates some of the products that we use in our hair. And boy, oh boy, did they divulge a lot. I was so intrigued after these interviews. And speaking of eyes, you like that segue right there? Shout out to Agency for partnering with me on this video. Their collaboration helps to support this single mom of one shedding season. Agency, you know I've talked about them here before on the channel. They're the online platform where you can get custom prescription serums for anti-aging, for dark spots, without ever leaving your house. You ain't even gotta get out of the bed to do this. Agency recently launched a custom prescription eye formula. Now let me tell you something, because you know, somebody that's about to be 43 and my analytics tell me that most of you guys are between the ages of 25 and 34. Aging runs up on you real quick. One minute you're on a party bus twerking with your friends, the next you're in your private car turning down the volume on the radio so you can see an address better. We've talked about their future formula, which is for anti-aging, and their dark spot formula, which is for dark spots. If you're still dealing with dark spots in 2024, I highly suggest checking out this video, but right now we're gonna talk about the eyes. The eye formula is also customized for your specific needs. It can contain ingredients like the gold standard anti-aging tretinoin, green tea extract, glycerin, dexpanthenol, or caffeine. But of course, which percentages and which of those ingredients will be in it, of course, is customized for you. My custom eye formula has 10% glycerin, 1% dexpanthenol, 2% green tea extract, and 1% caffeine. So mine doesn't have tretinoin in it because I also use their future formula, which has tretinoin in it already. That's the level of attention and detail we need. There's also a free trial offer. Make sure you head over to the description box for the link to sign up and for more details. This video is going to be quite the reference. I highly recommend watching the full video to make sure you get the full context. However, there will be timestamps listed in the description so that if there's a section that you want to come back to later on after you have watched the full video, you can easily do so. So, you know, check out the description. Now back to the hair. And to make sure that we are on the same page here, we need to go over a couple of terms. And first and foremost, what the heck do you mean by heat training, Danielle? In a nutshell, heat training is when someone, and in this case, someone with naturally curly, kinky, or coily hair, uses heat tools, namely a blow dryer and a flat iron. You know, maybe some hot comb action in there as well. They use those tools to thermally straighten the hair. Now, if you're doing this over time, the natural curl pattern may loosen some as a result of heat styling your hair, which is the heat training part. For some people, this makes styling the hair easier, and for some people, they also are able to realize more length retention as a result. This length retention is often realized because it's much easier for the natural sebum from the scalp to travel down the hair shaft when the hair is straight than it is when the hair is in a coily or kinky state. This natural protection from the sebum also helps to moisturize the hair and makes it less prone to breakage, but we're going to talk about that more as we talk with our experts. Now, there are levels when it comes to heat training, and it's not going to be for everybody, but we're going to explore a lot of that in this video. Now, another term that we need to be all on the same page on is the reference to the hair typing chart. Now, I assume that most people knew what the hair chart was but in one of my previous hair videos, there were a lot of questions about what is this 3A, 3B, 3C thing. So I figured I'd quickly explain right here. Now, while this hair typing system may have some merit in guiding you towards products and hairstyles that are probably better for your hair type, the hair typing system does receive some valid criticism as well. However, the hair typing system has become so widely used that it might be a little confusing to switch to something else, so we just gonna stick with it. You know, you could kind of think of it as try your best to find 5 people, just 5. I was gonna say 100, but I'm like, try to find 5 people that's not gonna call this Vicks. All right, so type 3A hair features loose and larger curls with an S-shaped pattern. 3B hair consists of tight spiral curls resembling bouncy ringlets. Type 3C hair comprises tight springs that are packed closely together. Now, 4A hair looks somewhat similar to 3C, except it is a tighter spiral. 4B hair has a zigzag pattern, while 4C hair has a very tight coil. As I mentioned before, there is some valid criticism about this hair typing system. There are hair types that are beyond that 4C pattern, which we talked about in an unlisted video that, you know, I'll link in the description if you want to check that out. So as I alluded to earlier, the tighter your curl pattern is, the more difficult it is for that natural sebum coming out of your scalp to travel down the hair shaft, coat the hair, give it that protection, that moisture, that natural moisture that the hair, you know, the hair be loving it. This also means that the tighter your curl pattern is, oftentimes the more dry prone your hair is as well. And the more dry prone your hair is, the more susceptible it is to breakage. So how does heat training affect our curl pattern?
When you are heat training, you are breaking down the bonds and the protein structure of the hair. So a lot of people will say, well, heat training is heat damage, but technically it's not, because when you get, it does the same thing as if you get like a relaxer, or if you get like bleach in your hair before you get hair color. We don't say like I have relaxer damage, or we don't say I have bleach hair color damage. So all of that heat training, relaxers, hair color, that's breaking down the bonds and the protein structure of the hair. It doesn't really damage the hair unless you like are using extreme amounts of heat, like you are on 450 or above or something like that, and you're literally burning your hair off. Other than that, you're just breaking down the protein and the bond structures, but you regain that by doing like Olaplex treatments, protein treatments, so you can rebuild those bonds while you're still using heat on your hair. So it doesn't really damage the hair unless you don't know what you're doing and you're just using excessive amounts of heat.
So that was YouTuber turned licensed cosmetologist Michelle. She is the founder of the YouTube channel Shell Talks Hair. She's also the founder of the She Nourished line of hair products, and she's one of my favorite experts to go to when I'm looking for heat training content. One of her more popular videos is titled How I Did 25 Silk Presses in a Year and Still Kept My Curls. So she knows a lot about this subject. Shell and I had a chat, and she shared with me that she started her YouTube channel 9 years ago, and in the midst of that decided to become a licensed cosmetologist. And I, for one, am super elated that she did so, because with her channel, you get the best of both worlds. Someone who routinely uploads tutorials and hair information, but this person is a licensed professional. In fact, she only works on clients with natural hair, and a huge majority of her clientele only get silk presses.
So about 70% of my clientele is heat trained. So I work with only natural hair, and I only do silk presses, and I only do my healthy hair maintenance treatment, which they leave with a blowout. So that's all I do. So about 70% is heat trained. And the way they maintain their hair at home is not a difficult routine. It's basically don't use extra heat on your hair. They go home with my products. So I tell them to use my products in between salon visits. Just no high tension hairstyles, mostly protective styles. So like wigs, stuff like that. And just put yourself on a basic routine that you can maintain in between salon visits.
All right. Heat training versus heat damage. There is a debate even amongst the experts. Now, myself personally, ain't nobody asked me, I ain't no hair expert, but this is my channel, so whatever. I don't see heat training as damage in the same sense of breakage, hair loss, or split ends.
So there's a difference between heat training and silk pressing your hair with a flat iron versus blow drying. So I get this question a lot. So blow drying won't necessarily heat train you, or it won't necessarily damage your hair. So I have a client that has been to me since I started, and we blow dry her hair every 2 weeks, and there's no change in her curl pattern. So there's a difference between blow drying your hair and flat ironing it. So that's one. The second thing I want to mention, because I know someone's going to say it's just heat damage, and like I said before, it does the same thing as you getting relaxer. It does the same thing as you getting bleach. So both of them break down that protein and that bond structure in the hair. So you're doing the same thing when you heat train, and the only thing you have to do is just continuously get those proteins and those bond maintenance treatments to rebuild that structure back up. So, because I don't want people to be like, oh, it's just heat damage. It's not necessarily just heat damage. It's you just reforming the bonds in the hair.
But is it for all hair types?
Heat training is for all hair types and textures. So if you have like fine to medium textured hair, you want to make sure you're just not doing as many silk presses as someone who has coarse hair. So you just want to make sure you know your hair texture before you do decide to heat train.
And y'all, Michelle practices what she preaches. Of course, naturally, I had more questions for her. And when do we know if we've gone overboard?
So when you start to see your curl pattern loosen up over time, then that's a sign that you're just heat training your hair. Now, if you go into like one silk press and you feel like you did it safely at a safe temperature, you did everything right, and you instantly get heat damage, then that just means that your strands were already weak before you put the heat on there. So a lot of things that people do, like in the natural hair community, like we do a lot of DIYs, we do a lot of like wetting of the hair every day. Over time, that can weaken your hair strands. So that's why when someone put heat on their hair, maybe one time, they instantly get heat damage, but that was because your hair strands were already weak prior to you putting heat on it. So there's a difference between like heat damage when you get completely straight pieces. That could be considered heat damage, especially if you haven't been using heat for like years before that. Now, a looser curl pattern, that's normal when you are heat training your hair, because you're putting that heat on it and then you are reforming those bonds and the protein structure in the hair. So it's just loosening up a little bit, but you can regain that by doing your protein treatments, your Olaplex treatments, and if you decide you don't want to use heat anymore, your curls will fully come back.
But you're gonna want to do this to make sure you don't go overboard.
So everyone's hair is different. So a great rule of thumb I like to tell people is you can start off with one silk press every 3 months. Now, if you have fine textured hair, then once every 3 months could possibly work for you, but you just have to determine yourself, like if your curls are loosening up too fast, or if you're getting straight pieces, that means you have to do less. But if your hair is coarse, typically you can do the once every 3 months, or you can do more. So it just depends on your hair texture and the condition of your hair prior to you wanting this heat train. So you can start off with just doing one every 3 months, or you can do more if your hair can handle it. So you can do once every 2 months, or you can do once a month if your hair can handle it. But if your hair is starting to act weird, you don't like the way your texture is looking, then I would say you might want to stick to once or twice a year.
So I've heard more than a few times that if you're somebody who's natural, and by that I mean someone who mostly, I would say 95% of the time wears their hair in its natural curly, coily, kinky state, that it is a good idea from time to time to straighten your hair, because there's sometimes can be some damage that you may not realize when your hair is in its natural state versus when it is straightened. And that has happened to me where I had some breakage, and I noticed the breakage when my hair was in its natural state, but it was not as noticeable as it was when I got that sucker straightened.
A lot of times when we're natural, we always pick one or the other. So we always pick like curly, natural hairstyles, or we go all in with heat styling. And it's good to mix both. So you can be curly most of the time throughout the year. You just want to make sure you're stretching your hair out too, so that you're able to see your ends and see like if you do have a lot of breakage. Because once you stretch your hair out, like if you blow dry it or if you flat iron it and then put a white cape on, you can see like your ends, you can see the breakage clearly. But when you're curly all the time, you don't necessarily get to see it. So it's good to mix both.
Now let's get into the styling part. I want to know what are the best heat tools to straighten your hair, and also heat protectants. Which one should we use?
I love ceramic tools, so I've been working with ceramic tools for 3.5 years since I've been doing hair, but I've also used titanium a little bit here and there. And the biggest thing that I noticed that ceramic tools will give you a lot less damage than titanium because they're less aggressive. And ceramic tools use the infrared technology where they heat the hair from the inside out. And they also are good for locking in moisture and sealing your cuticle. So I always tell people go for ceramic tools versus titanium because they're a lot less aggressive and you have a less chance of getting heat damage with ceramic versus titanium. So I do have a silk press training course that goes more in depth on this. But for heat protectants, you always want to make sure that you using like a leave-in conditioner that has like silicones and hydrolyzed proteins in them. So even if you have low porosity hair, you still want to use something that has hydrolyzed proteins in it. So you will use like a leave-in spray on your hair first, and then you will blow dry, and then you can use a serum, and then you can follow up with a light thermal spray. So that's 3 levels of heat protection right there. So you always want to create that barrier between the cuticle and the heat so that you have a less chance of getting heat damage. And I always tell people this, do not try to use like grapeseed oil or like raw oils, or like, don't do that. Just go to the store and buy products that have been formulated to help you, protect your hair against heat. Like there's no guessing work in it. You just go straight to the store and buy those products that was formulated to help you protect your hair against the heat.
Now let me tell you something. Michelle made a beautiful point, could not have been more beautiful, point about buying products that are specific. I always have a problem saying that word. For some reason, my mouth, my teeth, and my tongue do not cooperate with each other. But products that are specifically formulated for the hair. Like, we ain't doing the DIYs, getting the raw oils and the butters and all that other stuff, because y'all be trying to do that with skincare sometimes too. And unless you really, really know what you're doing, I'd have to take a strong, educated guess that the vast majority of you do not have, cosmetic chemistry backgrounds. So let's please leave the product creation to the pros. And make sure you keep watching, because we'll be talking to a Black scientist who helps make Black hair care products for a huge organization. Now, from a stylist perspective, I also wanted to know about reversing the effects of heat training.
So if you do it right and you don't have like straight pieces, you can reverse it. So what you will do is you will just lessen the amount of silk presses you get, so maybe once or twice a year, and then you will start to notice that your hair that's growing out of your roots is a lot thicker and fuller than your heat trained hair. So you will have that line of demarcation. So you just want to make sure you reduce the amount of silk presses you get. You also want to make sure you're getting your trims and your treatments as well. So the protein, the Olaplex, I know some people don't like Olaplex, but whatever bond maintenance product that you want to use, just make sure you're doing that consistently and that you're getting your trims as well. So treatments and trims, and then the protein treatments as well if you have medium to high porosity hair. So you just want to make sure you're doing all of that while you're transitioning out of that heat trained hair, because you will notice a difference between the 2 textures when you are transitioning from a relaxer, but just not as intense. So any hairstyles that you did while you were transitioning from a relaxer, you can do. So twist outs, braid outs, but you won't notice too much of the demarcation line as you did when you were transitioning from that relaxer. So braid outs, twist outs, you can wear wigs. As long as you have your edges still, then wigs would be a great style to transition out. You can still even get silk presses. I've actually transitioned people from heat trained hair to their natural curls while still giving them silk presses. It's not a skill that every stylist can do, or not everyone can do, but it can be done. So you just don't want to do the silk presses as often. Yeah, so those are some styles that you can wear while you're transitioning from that heat trained hair.
And she also gave us this jewel about products to use when you heat train.
Curly girl products, when you're trying to silk press your hair, they have too many oils in them, they have too many butters in them. and they just coat the hair. And then we as naturals already don't clean our hair good enough. So I'm like, they're just sticking on, that stuff is just sticking onto your hair and it's not being cleansed out properly. So when you do go to like get a silk press, it reverts because your hair was never receiving moisture because your cuticles have been blocked for so long. So I'm like, these no curly girl products, and then a lot of the other products like the Redkins and the other products, the Joycos like that we use for Paul Mitchell, that we use for our hair, can sometimes contain too much protein for our hair. So it's like there was like not really any good products. So that's why I created my shampoo and conditioner, because I'm like, these products are going to work for everyone's hair. And then on top of that, it would be good to use these if you're heat training too, because it doesn't have too many butters, too many oils that will stick on your hair and just stay there and won't wash out. So that's why everything kind of just flowed.
Next, now, I myself, over the years, have thought of my hair as being invincible until recently, I damn near brush my edges out, y'all. On the surface, a lot of the things that we do to our hair aren't inherently bad or inherently good, but sometimes we can go overboard. So to save us from ourselves, I had to chat with Dr. Crystal Agu. Now I gotta grab my phone to make sure that I get all of her credentials and accolades correct. So she is an academic board certified dermatologist. She is an NIH SOCS, Skin of Color Society, DF supported alopecia researcher, an NMQF 40 under 40 awardee, author of 90 Days to Beautiful Hair and 90 Days to Beautiful Curly Hair. And she's a friend to the channel because she's been on here dropping gems in quite a lot of the hair videos on this channel. So I'm very happy to have her on the channel once again, because I had a slew of questions that I need to ask her about this heat training stuff. Now, keep in mind that by the time someone sees someone like Dr. Agu, who specializes in hair loss, they might be on the very ends of the hair loss spectrum. Off the bat, I wanted to know, how does heat training affect the structural integrity of Black women's hair, especially as opposed to other hair types?
When we talk about heat training and we talk about converting your natural curl pattern over time to a straight curl pattern, the two bonds that I always talk about are your strong bonds and your weak bonds. So if someone permanently straightens their hair, they break the strong bonds once, right? It's a permanent treatment. And then you can reform the hair from a curly curl pattern to straight. Heat predominantly manipulates the weak bonds, okay? And so in the beginning, when you're heat training your hair, you're breaking those weak bonds. And then when you apply water back to the hair, you reformulate those weak bonds until you get some of that curl pattern back. But when you don't have your curl pattern restored, it's because you're starting to break down some of the strong bonds, and that happens slowly over time. And so there is inherent weakening of your hair strand or hair shaft over time. Now, when we think about curly hair versus straight hair, curly hair is inherently more fragile and prone to breakage. Part of that is just because there's more dryness that occurs. There's less kind of natural protection. And part of that is because the curly hair type, each twist of the curl that you have is a point of fragility. So if you are someone who's starting with, let's say, type 3 curls, you don't require as much training to go to a straight hair type, right? So you don't have as much overall weakening that occurs over the course of heat training. But if you are a type 4 curl, if you're a 4C, right, and you are trying to train your hair to go straight, you are going to need to break a lot of strong bonds in the process. And so your final state will be weaker, right? So then you can imagine if someone was starting with type 2 wavy hair and they just said, oh, you know, I just want to get a little bit straighter, they're not requiring as much damage to get to that final appearance.
Are there specific considerations or precautions that we need to take before heat training our hair to minimize the risk of damage and hair loss?
Additionally, if you have a lot of water on your hair strand or hair shaft and you apply heat so that that water rushes out quickly, it could actually break the hair shaft in the process. And so when you are heat training your hair, drying it a little bit with kind of cool or warm air just to gently release some of that water is preferable before you then apply higher amounts of heat to straighten it. So you never want to see that steam coming out, right? When you're blow drying your hair or you're flat ironing, if you're hearing a lot of sizzling, that's not a good thing, right? That's just like water popping, and it can pop within the hair shaft and break it. And so kind of slowly progressing, slowly drying it until then you finally straighten it can help. And then certainly applying a heat protectant can be helpful as well. But I don't want people to believe that if they apply a heat protectant, then they can apply heat at any temperature and be fine. It's really only slightly decreasing the amount of heat that's transferred to your hair.
Now, Dr. Agu also added something to this conversation that added to the value that you're getting from this video. So let's hear what she had to say.
We'll say, well, why are you heat training? Why are you wearing your hair straight? Just wear your hair natural. I am a big proponent of styling your hair in any way that's going to support you wearing your own hair. My bias as a dermatologist is that I see a lot of women, a lot of Black women with hair loss. And I always say, if I could retire because no one is suffering from hair loss anymore, that would be amazing, right? If my clinic was empty, that's a blessing. And I very rarely have women who come in who are wearing their hair all the time, right? Who are heat training their hair and then presenting with alopecia. A lot of the style related alopecia that I see in my clinic is due to people feeling like their hair is too much to handle, right? And feeling like they need extended periods of time where they don't have to take care of it at all. But unfortunately, a lot of those styling practices will either pull out the hair or lead to dryness of the hair because it's not being conditioned enough. And that's when people get a medical alopecia diagnosis. So if you have the type of hair that will thrive with regular blowouts, then more power to you, because for me, it's just about figure out what your hair can handle. And if you feel comfortable, if it makes sense for your lifestyle, the amount of time you have available to style your hair, then I think it's really important to do it. And so this video to me is for the women who are good candidates for heat training and just don't want to feel bad about it.
And that's a great point, because I feel like there are women out there who feel like they have to be natural, but also at the same time can't really maintain their natural hair as they should. And then they wind up doing some of the practices that Dr. Agu talked about that winds up damaging their hair. So I do wonder, are there certain hair textures or conditions that make you more susceptible to heat damage or loss as a result of heat training?
Absolutely. So this is when I get into my hair resiliency, and we've talked about this a lot. I talk about resilient hair types, and it's really person to person, just like, someone may have sensitive skin and their best friend does not have sensitive skin. So you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. But generally speaking, the type of curl patterns and hair types that I think are good candidates for heat training are people with looser curls on average. So I would say a 3A to a 4A, people with coarse hair strands, right? So sometimes people say, oh, my hair's so coarse. That's a good thing when it comes to resiliency. And that is because many women, men and women who have coarse hair really are referring to the fact that they have 3 layers in their hair shaft, a cortex, a cuticle, and a medulla. Whereas people with very fine hair strands typically only have 2 layers, a cortex and a cuticle. And so if your hair texture is coarse, it likely has more resiliency and can withstand the amount of heat over time that's required to heat train your hair, right? So if you also have high density hair, right? So if you have a few hairs that break, but overall you're still going to have a lot of length and a lot of hairs that can grow to their full length, then that is someone who I would think would also be a good candidate. So type 3 to 4A, high density, coarse hair. And certainly if you're a 4B and you have really high density hair, really coarse hair strands, you may find that you're also someone who's able to withstand heat training.
Wait, so what does that mean for those of us with 4C hair?
It requires so much heat because you have way more curls than even someone with 4A, right? It's an exponential increase with each step of the typing pattern, right? So if you have so many curls that you can't appreciate an actual curl on your hair strand, right? That's the definition of 4C. The amount of heat that's required to turn it straight means that over time, you're going to experience a lot of breakage. I have friends who have 3C, 4A hair, And throughout their 20s, they've been able to heat train without issue. But then once they hit their 30s, because as we age, we lose resiliency in every body part, they find that they're having a lot more breakage and their hair is a lot more fine. So sometimes that resiliency changes. So things that you may have been able to do without issue in your teens and 20s, you find that you can't do once you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s. So age is also an important factor.
Can heat training contribute to common scalp issues experienced by Black women, such as dryness, itchiness, or inflammation?
In theory, right, the hair and the scalp are two different entities, right? So what you do to your hair typically doesn't affect your scalp. Now, if you're blow drying on really high heat to the point that you can feel like your scalp getting itchy because you are applying so much heat, just like if you applied a lot of heat to your skin, it actually can make your skin feel really dry, and dry skin often is itchy and flaky. And so that's just another benefit of minimizing the amount of heat that your hair and your scalp is exposed to.
Could heat training exacerbate certain hair loss conditions like traction alopecia or telogen effluvium?
The medical term for hair breakage from styling habits, so like not losing your hairline, but let's say you are combing your hair and you know it's not full length hair strands, it's just little baby hairs just always breaking off. We call that acquired trichorexis nodosa. And some people have acquired trichorexis nodosa that's so severe that you can just see patches all over their scalp. So when people have an additional alopecia diagnosis, I tell them it's so important that you really practice healthy hair techniques, because we have to keep every other hair on your head. So if you have traction alopecia, but then on top of that, you're heat training and your hair is not that resilient and it's constantly breaking, your traction alopecia is going to be way more noticeable, right? Because now you have two forms of hair loss that we are now having to account for. But does heat training specifically worsen traction alopecia? No, just because traction alopecia is a form of hair loss that occurs as a result of pulling of the hair strands.
How does heat training affect the hair follicles and the hair growth cycle?
Heat training will have no effect on the hair growth cycle. That is genetically predetermined, and it doesn't have any impact on follicle health. Now, if you are hot combing, right? Most of us are using blow dryers or flat irons, but if you are hot combing and you hit your scalp, you can get a thermal burn, but that still shouldn't have any permanent impact on the scalp or the follicle itself.
What role does proper hair care and maintenance play in mitigating some of the risks that are associated with heat training?
Stand up to heat training better than hair that's dry, right? So like, let's say someone is trying to exit protective style, so they don't really deep condition often, they don't really use a leave-in conditioner often. I always use this metaphor of a tree branch, right? So if you pick a branch off of a tree or a bush and it is really dry, when you snap it in the middle, it's completely brown, it breaks a lot more easily. Whereas if you pick a branch that is really well moisturized, when you snap it, it's green on the inside, it requires a lot more force, right? So if your hair is constantly well moisturized and you apply heat to it, it is less likely to snap off and break over time. So when you are getting silk presses, blowouts, it's important to do that when you've had a deep conditioning session. So really making sure that you emphasize moisturizing the hair as often as possible.
So what Dr. Agar said about making sure that your hair is properly moisturized when you heat train reminded me to think back of what Michelle was saying about there not really being great products out there for naturals who decide to heat train.
A true moisturizer has water as the first ingredient. And a lot of products that we would use when the hair has been blown out are silicone based, right? So they don't necessarily have water as the first ingredient, so they will not revert your curl pattern. It is very difficult to moisturize your hair when you are trying to wear it straight all the time. It's really hard to get around it. And it's one of the reasons why I think that curl patterns 3, right? 3A, B, C, and maybe a 4A are going to fare better, because the ability of the natural sebum to coat the hair shaft is higher in women who are straightening their hair, because the curl pattern, they just have a looser curl pattern, right? And so the curlier your hair is, the more dry prone it is. And so it's very hard to have to eliminate that use of moisturizer. So I don't necessarily think that there's a way around it, besides that it just limits who's going to be a good candidate for it. The other high line statement I do want to make, when my patients come to me and they've experienced severe hair breakage from being natural and wearing their hair naturally, like let's say maybe they're not able to moisturize their natural hair as often as it requires, they don't have the time to style it, and they say, I think I could back off of protective styles if my hair is straight. If straight hair is what you desire, and especially if you have type 4 hair, I believe your hair will fare better with a mild relaxer as opposed to heat. And that is because heat damage is cumulative. So if you straighten your hair today, you have a certain amount of damage. Then when you straighten it a month from now, you add that damage on. So now you have the damage from treatment 1 and the damage from treatment 2. And then when you straighten it again at month 3, you add that on, and very quickly you can exceed the amount of damage that you would experience from a single straightening treatment. Because remember, a chemical straightener is permanent. You do it once and that's it, right? You never apply that relaxer to hair that's already been relaxed, or that texturizer to hair that's already been texturized. And then I tell my patients, if you chemically straighten, then you don't use heat, but it allows you to cut down your styling time, and it's often a lot easier for people to manage. And I always do a throwback to the Jerry curl, right? The Jerry curl in the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of women thrived with that. That was a texturizer treatment that changed their curl pattern and relied on regular use of a moisturizer. So I don't think heat training is the best approach for many women who want to be straight. For many people, I think that a texturizer makes a lot more sense. You know, Black dermatologists who do a lot of hair loss, we've started talking more and more about this too. And I think it's just because of the proportion of our patients who come in, who feel really, helpless when it comes to taking care of their own hair. And I think that natural hair care is an advanced level, right? So if you're coming into the natural hair period and you're at a beginner level, you may find that you become frustrated really, really quickly. It really requires a lot of time, effort, and understanding of your hair and the products needed for it to thrive.
Recently, there's been a lot of talk about the health risks of using chemical relaxers, and there's also been a lot of misinformation being spread about relaxers being banned as part of an FDA ban on hair straighteners. So I asked Dr. Agu if she's heard anything new within her industry.
You may have talked about this before, but the FDA, starting in April 2024, is going to ban hair straighteners that contain formaldehyde. And that is because formaldehyde is a well-known cancer-causing agent. This has been known since the early 80s. And for those of us who went to medical school, when we dealt with cadavers who were preserved in formaldehyde, we knew that we're not supposed to touch them. We're not supposed to get anything on our skin. So this is well known. Formaldehyde is the active ingredient in keratin treatments. And keratin treatments are primarily marketed to non-Black women, though many Black women have opted for keratin treatments with the thought that they are safer than relaxers. I've actually seen a lot of media inaccurately report that the ban is on relaxers, and it's not. It's actually on keratin treatments. And that's because relaxers straighten the hair through ingredients like sodium hydroxide and guanidine hydroxide. The most recent study that was, I think, got the most attention was a study that linked hair straighteners to gynecologic cancers, so like uterine cancer, for example. But in that study, they lumped people who would use any type of hair straightener, so including silk presses. So if you had your hair pressed, if you used a keratin treatment, if you used a relaxer, if you used a hot comb, you were considered to be someone using a hair straightener. And they said that that was associated with the increased risk of uterine cancer. But of course, I think for many of us who are Black women, we understand how different those styling approaches are, and that was not something that it appeared the researchers understood. So still really kind of a limited understanding on the types of straightening processes, they're linked to any health risks, and in particular ingredients. I think this is what it all boils down to, right? Is just figuring out, are there ingredients that are linked to harmful outcomes? And as far as we know, there's nothing that's unique to relaxers, no ingredient in particular that's been cited as a health risk. Primarily done within the Black community, where those styling treatments, whether it's diet, whether it's whatever, are generally associated with being bad, even when people don't understand them, but usually because people don't understand them. And so I did see media run very quickly with these headlines about relaxers and they're going to ban them. And actually the head scientist at the FDA, who's the one who pushed for this ban, is a Black woman. And she gave she made a video that I think it would be great for so many people to watch, but she explicitly talks about the types of products that will be banned. And I think honestly, it's been a long time coming. There's no reason that these products should have been on the counter, available to clients and to stylists. But you will see all the relaxers that you're used to seeing on the shelf, they'll still be there because it's not the relaxers, it's the keratin treatments.
Now, I'm sure you've heard of the expression that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So that being said, I wanted to know, what are some of the early signs that something ain't right when it comes to heat training, and what steps do we need to take once we realize, that something has gone awry? And then sometimes you might not even be able to recognize the signs that something's going wrong. So let's see what Dr. Agu had to say.
Right? So it's kind of like protective style, sounds really comforting, but it's not really protecting. It's a style of convenience. So we can call it heat training, but what it is heat damage, because when you're not able to get the curl pattern to revert, it's because you've broken some bonds, right? That being said, if you have, if it takes a lot of damage before you notice your hair breaking, then you're still okay. Right? So so what's the point at which you've exceeded the amount of heat that your hair can take? You'll know that if your hair's starting to break, if it's uneven, if you're having to trim more often, that's a sign that you should back away from the heat. You should go into any kind of relaxer treatment, any type of color that's going from dark to light, knowing that your hair is going to be weaker. That's just unavoidable, because those strong bonds, a lot of them are gone to get that final effect. Even when we think about texturizer versus a relaxer, what's the difference? Well, the ingredients are the same. The amount of the active ingredient is decreased, so you break fewer bonds. So that's why your hair is not as straight with a texturizer as it is with the relaxer, but you get to keep some of that integrity, or you get to keep some of that strength.
Now, although they were stated in different ways, I do see where Dr. Agu and Michelle are basically saying similar things. And basically that is, if your curls ain't coming back, baby, that hair is damaged. Now let's discuss any specific hair care products or ingredients that may help protect Black women's hair from heat damage during styling.
I remember when we wrote our textbook, this was a hard one to find too, because a lot of the times the ingredients are just silicones, and that's why what your hair feels like after you straighten your hair, it's the same as like a serum, right? But it's just in a spray form. But that can decrease the effective amount of heat that is transferred to your hair.
Next, I wanted to find out more about what goes into the creation of products that are made for heat-styled hair. So I talked to Dr. Atia Jordan-Brown. She's a senior scientist and scientific communications senior manager at P&G Hair. Now, I have worked with P&G a number of times over the past decade. I've been to their labs in Cincinnati. I've been into the room where they have all of these, it looks a little weird, but then it's like, okay, I get it. Where they have all of these different bundles of hair, hair everywhere, right? And as a result of working with the brand for so many times over the decade, I've come to know a lot of the people over there. So I use my network of people that I know in P&G to obtain this interview with Dr. Atia. Now, I don't really have that type of relationship with other brands where I can just be like, hey, I need an expert real quick to do this, blah, 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 blah. At least not yet. So I rely a lot on specialists from P&G for that particular reason. But in the future, if I do get to know some experts of this level at other brands, I'll of course also include them in my videos. Yo, and off the bat, I wanted to know about heat protectants. I wanted to know what's in them, what makes them work to minimize the damage from heat, what ingredients go into these formulations. I wanted to know all of that.
They're there to protect the hair from that intense heat and that direct connection. So really it's covering the hair, providing a barrier in that surface of the hair itself and the heat that's being provided. So this can be ingredients such as silicones, which are typically used to provide that barrier and have that sealing in of the hair. You also may have emollients, which provide that protection and providing moisture and retaining the moisture in the hair, as well as you'll find like different oils within and polymers within as well to provide that coating as well as providing that moisture and health to the hair.
I'm currently enrolled in a cosmetic science certificate program at Spelman Online. You know, only got 2 more classes to go. I should be done before the end of this year, you know, go me. So conversations like this really do intrigue me. So silicones coat the hair and then help to limit the amount of heat that impacts the cuticle. Is that right?
Large polymers there that are coating the hair to provide that barrier. So that way the hair is not being directly impacted by the, directly in contact with that heat.
What scientific research or testing goes into developing heat protectant products that ensures their efficacy and safety for diverse hair types?
The temperature, the fundamentals of hair, first of all, understanding the hair structure, like we said, we have the cuticles on the outside and making sure that we have that in healthy condition. And then understanding the tools that are used. So understanding the temperatures at which the hair can be impacted to get that straightening look from going from your, curl coils to the straight look, and really understanding where that point is within the hair that you're impacting the hair structure and the integrity, as well as when we're using a heat protectant, at what level the heat protectant is able to protect and at what temperature it can go up to. So you'll see a lot of products that'll have tested up to 450 degrees, which is great to have that range because that's really past the point of where you would normally have a flat iron. New technologies and new ingredients that can take a little bit longer because you're doing a lot of developmental process and formulation in the upfront area. And really it's looking at, what ingredients we want to have in there and really understanding consumers. A lot of them are interested in different ingredients. So if we think about silicones, and now we're doing a lot of technology and understanding how to modify silicones so they can be a little bit more soluble, so that's not creating that thought of buildup on the hair. So, within that work, there's a lot of research and testing, the consumer testing, physical testing that goes on to understand, when we get to a good product, that it's going to be delivering the benefit and delivering what everyone needs as far as their hair and protecting it when we're applying heat.
Can you explain to us how heat protectant products interact with the hair shaft on a molecular level to help protect against heat damage?
As we think about the overall hair structure, we have the core of the hair, we have the proteins that are within the hair and lipids inside, and then you have that nice shield of the cuticles on the surface. So I think about the cuticles as shingles on the roof. You want them to be in line and protecting the environment. So when we have a heat protectant, that's just adding a nice little layer so that if you think about water running off the roof, you don't want it seeping in. So the same thing with this high intense temperature that we're applying to our hair. We want to make sure that it's distributed throughout the hair, it's protecting the actual outside surface of the hair, and then really getting rid of and dissipating that heat quickly so that when we apply more heat, then it's going away quickly. So you're retaining that structure into that flattening without holding onto the heat that can lead to additional damage to your hair.
Dr. Atiya had mentioned that at P&G they're working on a way to be able to manipulate silicones so that they don't leave a coating on the hair, which some consumers just don't desire. So I asked, if there's any other, particular scientific developments or any research that they're doing right now, that they can tell, because some of this stuff be top secret, that will impact the type of heat protectant products that are made for Black women.
Applying to the surface of the hair to protect it. But the other piece when it comes to protecting your hair is understanding, how are we making sure we're protecting the inside and working from the inside out? So a lot of the research is done with understanding, again, that structure of the hair. How do we maintain integrity? Understanding what vitamins and proteins can go in the hair. So as I think about the ingredients that we particularly use, we are adding additional vitamins, additional nutrients into the hair that is allowing it to penetrate into the hair and repair the hair, as well as making sure that when you're actually applying heat, you're protecting the outside as well.
Now I ask this next question for everybody, but especially for the product junkies amongst us. I wanted to know, how do heat protectants complement other products like moisturizers, conditioners, etc. within a heat training regimen?
Yes, for heat training, and really I would think about heat training as you're changing the structure of your hair temporarily. So you're going from that natural curl to straighten. So as we know, as soon as we get water on our hair, it likes to revert back, which is good, and that's what we want to happen to our hair. So when we're thinking about heat training, we want to make sure that we're providing the right ingredients and materials on there to begin with, to make sure that our hair gets back when we're done with it being straight. So when it comes to like that regimen, you really want to start off with a good conditioner initially. So before you even start doing flat iron, you want to protect and prep your hair. So having a good strong conditioner, as we'll kind of get to the recommendations, but a good strong conditioner is going to provide a lot of that moisture and nutrients into your hair to begin with, so that when you are applying heat and you are covering it and protecting it, then that means that you have that natural protection inside the cuticles and the fibers, the hair fiber, and then building out into that strength. So first, a good prep is having that deep conditioner. From there, you want to be able to make sure that you're, again, applying moisture. That's going to allow you to make sure, one, we're having a good detangle before we start to do the heat and applying heat to the hair. We also want to make sure that we're having that protection overall and sealing. So then with that heat protectant, you're making sure that your cuticles are protected, and then you can apply your heating tool. And I say the last thing you want to do is make sure you have a serum or oil that you're applying to your hair at the end, just to make sure that you're sealing it in, you're making sure that you're protecting the hair after you straightened it. And that also helps with reducing any frizz and keeping your hair smooth and shiny in that longer protective style of straightening.
Okay, and so this is assuming that someone has a good shampoo in the beginning as well, too, right?
So you definitely want to have a good shampoo as we think about adding and layering products. We want to make sure that we're starting out with fresh, clean hair. You want to make sure that you are getting a good lather to remove all that buildup in oils. And again, if we're heat training, we're applying products throughout, and then cleansing. So you want to have that good cleanse up front before you even start with the conditioning.
Now, how would clarifying shampoos come into this, as some people do experience some of that product buildup because the silicones are coating the hair?
If you're heat training, you want to make sure that you're taking breaks in between, ideally not providing heat multiple times in a week to reduce the heat damage that could be happening. And then I would say it can be a frequency up to 2 weeks of just like doing that cleanse, or even a month of getting a nice clarifying cleanse. And I think it's just looking at what's there and available. So you may get a clarifying cleanse, but there may be products that also provide that nutrients and moisture after the clarifying. So having multiple washes too allows your hair to really get that full clean, and then going into a second wash where you can make sure that you are getting that hair back into its healthy state before we start to provide heat again. We're not applying too much product once you have your hair straight. You want to be mindful of adding additional products on there. When our hair is straight, we like to go a little bit longer, because the idea is like, if we're straighter, we can last it longer. So thinking about, what are those transition styles as it may start to revert back into the curl, so you're not again applying additional heat. And then if you do apply additional heat, want to again have that heat protectant, because that one time is just not enough if you're going to apply more heat. So you want to apply that protectant each time.
I would also love to know about any clinical studies or consumer trials that have been conducted to test the performance of these heat protecting products especially on Black women's hair.
We do a lot of consumer testing and understanding of the hair products and how that impacts the hair. So not only do we focus on, particularly with texture hair, understanding the changes, by looking at under the microscope, doing hair analysis with testing, we also test with individuals that are, panelists to test the product out and really to evaluate the experience from the beginning of using the product to that end result. So a lot within that testing is making sure that we can see the benefit and that folks that are trying it out see the benefit. And then analyzing, okay, well, what's really happening on that, like you said, the molecular level on that analysis of the hair. So we do a lot of testing within that as well to make sure that we're seeing, in this case, for Pantene, we have Pantene Pro V vitamin B blend and making sure that it's actually penetrating into the hair and providing the nutrients from the inside out so that when we get to heat protectant and styling, we know that our hair is safe and having that strong foundation to begin with. So it's a lot of work of understanding what's going on in the hair on the inside, and then as we add the protectant on the outside to make sure that we're, again, if you do a wash, you're not having that buildup when it comes to a heat protectant.
I think most of us approach heat protectants as something, you just slap that on your hair and then you do your thing with your heat styling tools. However, I wanted to know if there were any tips or any other steps that we need to be doing to effectively be using these heat protectants during heat training.
That when you've already had a good detangling, as we know, we want to make sure that we don't have detangles when we're actually starting to do the hair. So making sure we're using a strong conditioner to begin with, and even a leave-in conditioner to layer to make sure we have all the detangles out. Then we're applying the heat protectant. As many of us do, we want to work in sections. So small sections. So one, you can make sure you're applying that heat protectant to that area and having that fully covered. A little is okay, but it's not going to hurt. Protect the whole hair because you want to make sure that you're getting that full coverage before you actually apply the heat. And then again, working in small sections so that you don't necessarily have to apply multiple passes to be able to get that style. And then again, as we talk about heat damage, starting on like the lower end of your flat iron or dryer, and then kind of increasing from there to find that right temperature. We don't want to go all the way to the max because that's going to even cause more damage. So making sure that, we're gradual to find where that, sweet spot is for us in our hair, and then being able to, just a couple passes, taking our time. Quick passes and multiple is going to add, more heat and therefore potentially increase damage versus, taking the time and passing through. And then once you're done, you want to let your hair cool for a little bit. So I think about this as like taking, that mac and cheese out the oven. Like you don't want to eat it right then and there because you're not going to have that solid look and feel in your mouth. It's going to fall apart. Your pie is going to fall apart. You want to let it sit so it can get to that solid, and then you want to apply, that ointment or your serum to be able to make sure you've got that full protection.
I also wanted to know the science behind the type of moisturizers one would use on heat-trained hair. Are there certain ingredients that we need to look out for? Are there certain ingredients we should stay away from?
If it's water and if it's heavy amount of water in this product, then we know our hair is going to start to revert. So as we think about what products, and like you said, that layering, we want to make sure that once you straighten your hair, you want to be mindful of the product, that serum that you're adding, because if it has a water base, then of course all that hard work and time that you put into straightening it is going to start to have that curls come back. So really making sure that when we're looking at the ingredients, you want something that's going to have more of an oil base, a bigger alcohol base. So as we think about that, those are like the fatty acids, the lipids that are actually good for the hair and providing that strength. That's the kind of serum that you want to look for. And then you also want to be able to look at, when we talk about conditioning, kind of that first step, you want to make sure that you're getting a lot of that nutrients and moisture back in the hair initially. And then of course, when you are like we said, washing and conditioning, again, looking for that strong moisture before you start to straighten again. But as soon as we get in the water, in the shower, our hair wants to have that moisture, and that's where it comes in. So but as we think about like porosity in our hair, as we change, do different styles with our hair, that's going to change the structure of our hair, which increases the ability for the water to move in and out of our hair. So for someone who may be doing more of straightening styles, and ideally you're using a heat protectant. If you're not, then you're impacting the cuticles on the surface, and that puts more exposure to your hair, to the elements, the environment, water going in and quickly reverting back. So having that heat protectant allows to be able to provide that cuticles with that sealant so that it at least reduces the water from coming in at least a little bit more before you start to, get a lot of water in your hair and get it wet. But moisture and water is what our hair loves. So it's a good sign when it starts to revert back that, okay, we're doing a lot of straightening, but, our hair is happy still and getting to those curls. And then if it's not reverting back as easily, with water. So you want to think about, okay, what is that deep conditioner I'm doing and providing to make sure that that hair is getting what it needs from the inside out. And then from there, making sure that you're continuously using that heat protectant to protect it overall.
Now, I know y'all saw them products that's on that shelf behind Dr. Atia, and if you're like me, you want to know what she got. What's in them products, Dr. Atia?
Understanding the hair and delivering real science, delivering the understanding, the knowledge of the science within the product, so that in a lot of cases you don't have to pay a higher value to get the benefits that you're looking for when you have a product that's going to deliver based on science. So as I think about that and that regimen that we talked about, I have some products here. I'll definitely highlight a few others that I don't have on the shelf, but one of them is our Pantene Miracle Rescues. So this is a new deep conditioner that we have out, and this has with melting pearls. So the melting pearls are even more concentrated nutrients that are delivered to the hair, and all of this focuses on repairing damage that can lead to breakage and repairing from the inside out. So as I mentioned, we have proteins. When we're heating our hair, we're impacting not only the outside surface, but the inside. So as you do your wash, you want to have a deep conditioner to provide that protection and delivering nutrients to the hair so that you can start to repair existing bonds, build new bonds, building that structure back into your hair before you start to straighten again. So this is a great one to try out. I love it. It's one of those that you can keep applying and really get that conditioner and conditioning feel and that smoothness before you even start to do your hair and start to get that flat iron. And it's great for detangling. I love using this to detangle.
I actually have the mask version of that product. It comes in a jar. So I would love to know who should use one over the other.
Impact the potential damage or susceptibility to damage. And the nutrients there that's provided in the melting pearls allows to deliver that increased amount of nutrients and conditioning to the hair. So for someone who does a lot of heat training, I would say using that mask is going to be the best bet, because now you're providing even more protection of your hair to help it get healthy and strong from the inside. And then from there, you are going to be able to see the benefits of using the flat iron and getting your hair back to that healthy looking state after heat. That is great. Smells wonderful. The heat protectant goes up to 450 degrees. So we don't want you going that high on the flat iron, but it does go up to there. So it's tested to that far. And we know that, with that, you're getting that surface coating and protection from the direct heat of the flat iron, that direct high temperature. Pantene also has a heat protectant, and actually it's a 10-in-1 leave-in spray. So with this, you're not just getting a heat protectant, you're also getting nutrients and you're getting moisture back into the hair. So it has multiple benefits that are going to be helpful for your hair throughout that process of straightening and then even after. And then the last, after we straighten our hair using a heat protectant, we want to have a serum. So this is just one of the mini serums that you can get. This is Gold Series. This is from our New Links collection serum, and this is really what you want to use to cover the hair after you've done the heat protectant. So this is just making sure that you get that shine, reducing any frizz and reducing any reverting back, because this is one that you don't have to worry about having a lot of water within this product. So that's the way to make sure that your hair is not going to revert after you spent the time straightening it, and to give that smoothest and finished look, as well as keeping those ends healthy and happy.
I do hope that conversations like this lead to us getting more products that are suitable for our hair when heat styled.
While our hair type is different, and actually curly and coily hair is more susceptible to damage just because it does have that spiral. So I think about it as our hair is a bit like a slinky, and you can stretch and bend the slinky, but if you hold on to it tightly and start to stretch it, it gets that tension. And so really with the products we look at is making sure that no matter what with hair, you're building in that strength, you're building in the nutrients to get it to that strong, resilient space initially. So there's a lot of products out there that will be great for natural hair. And then, as you said, for heat protected, making sure that we're always looking at, what is the hair condition, and, continuously doing the research. And then of course, getting feedback from folks that are, using the products and knowing that, okay, this is working or this is not working for them, so that we can have that feedback and loop, so we can work on finding the best products that work for people that are doing this straightening.
Now I gotta admit, the idea for this video did come from selfish reasonings, because I was like, dang, should I be heat training my hair? Let me use my network to to talk to some people about it. And then I was like, oh, this info is too good to keep to myself, so I share it with the public. Thanks once again to our panel of experts for lending their time and expertise to this subject matter. Now, if you want to learn more about how to keep or grow back your edges, you will need to check out this video here. You know, a lot of the information that you think you know about edges
is wrong.
So check out this video right here. Or if you're looking into what a dermatologist who specializes in hair loss thinks of your protective styles, make sure you check out this video right here. Hopefully I'm pointing in the right directions, but either one you choose, click on it and I'll see you there.